In this installment, I explore the second season of Canadian masterwork Slings Arrows. I track the first couple episodes of Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, an outrageously good episode of Family Guy from 2005, and a Christopher Guest submission I'd completely forgotten about. In what I've been watching, there's American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, and Grownish, plus I feel like I'm getting pretty good at recovering disc mishaps. Welcome to the show!
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on video, Fuzzy.
A couple of really quick corrections heading into this installment. Correction. Error. In referencing the X-Files last time, I reported the mini-revival featured 6 seasons. Clearly I misspoke. They didn't run 6 seasons in 2015. They ran 6 episodes. Also, I chanced to pull up some photos from the Minot Area Theatrical Society production of The Importance of Being Earnest, and whatever was going on with what, well, it actually looked like paneling in Algernon's drawing room, it was decidedly not deep red. I was probably thinking about our set design from Let's Murder Marcia from 2010, which was a rich burgundy and laid in this wonderful gold filigree trim across the top. Memory is what it is.
Friday night feature.
Tracking from the community theater discussion last time, I was quite pleased to encounter the Sundance presentation of the 2003-2006 Canadian production of Slings Arrows in my classic collection, featuring Paul Gross as Jeffrey Tennant, returned from past outrage and disgrace to take over at the New Burbage Shakespeare Festival for late artistic director Oliver Wells, who now plagues him as a ghost. Season 1 gets Jeffrey established directing Hamlet, Season 2 puts him in charge of the company's production of Macbeth, while Season 3 has him butting heads with King Lear. The episodes that surfaced in this cataloging effort covered, to my delight, the 6 episodes of Season 2. The season opens as Hamlet is closing, and Jeffrey receives an ominous portent from an elderly crone that he'll encounter more difficulties with Macbeth. He digs up Oliver's exhaustive notes for his Macbeth and searches for ways to stage his vision of the work in, under, around, and through Oliver's meddling, and hampered by his lead actor, Henry Breedlove's refusal to take direction. Show co-creator Mark McKinney, who I love as hapless store manager Glenn in Superstore, appears as business manager Richard in this series. In Season 2, he's secured some much-needed grant funding for the company, but it comes with strings attached. They must use it for rebranding. He contracts with avant-garde promotions firm Froghammer, who proceeds to take their money and produce the most outrageous ad campaign, offensive, critically damaging, poster-sized pictures of a butt to promote their main-stage production of Macbeth, billboard-sized depictions of their subscribers as doddering so-and-sos on their deathbed, full-page newspaper ads blowing up their worst reviews. Never has television seemed so appealing. Richard is losing his mind with each new indignity. His festival administrator Anna, beset with hopelessly incompetent interns, copes with longtime subscribers canceling their subscriptions in droves. The festival seems to be hemorrhaging money, and Richard would appear to be in serious trouble. In the meantime, the side-stage production of Romeo and Juliet suffers a setback when the guest director falls from the stage and breaks her neck, forcing them to bring in Jeffrey's longtime rival, Darren Nichols, to direct. Darren is every artsy, over-the-top experimentalist lampooned in theater. He wants to treat the play as a dry, emotionless, impersonal slate-gray power struggle, complete with the actors dressed as chess pieces, this to the rage of his leads, who themselves are so moved by their off-site workshopping efforts that Juliet ends up betting the gender-fluid and otherwise gay Romeo. Turns out to be a first for him. Behold the power of theater. There's a lot going on in every episode of Slings Arrows, which is so much backstage inside theater. It feels like the show was conceived, written, and performed by a troupe of actors specifically for me to enjoy. I wanted to take this Friday night feature and focus primarily on the Season 2 finale, titled Burnham Wood. Jeffrey has confronted his Macbeth, Henry Breedlove, about his refusal to take direction, pulling him from the opener and sending on his understudy, an unready, uncertain, and nondescript player who nevertheless has a triumphant performance. In the audience, Henry begrudgingly allows how Jeffrey's vision for the production is valid, and his mentor asserts that he should return, beg forgiveness, and beg for the role simply because he's done the work and the production is epic. Meanwhile, Jeffrey is happy with the understudy, but in conference with Oliver's ghost, agrees to be stronger with Henry, and he should beg him to come back. In actual fact, Henry does not beg, and forces Jeffrey to apologize to him. Thus, in bringing him back, Jeffrey is not quite so relenting. In response to Henry's arrogance, he arranges a secret meeting with his tech crew and the rest of the cast that, unfortunately, his one-time lover, Ellen Fanshawe, Lady Macbeth, catches wind of from one bubble-headed intern, and he needs to keep her away from Henry to set his dark machinations in place, which a locked storage closet serves to his purposes. Henry's performance on stage is his own, but he is now at the mercy of Jeffrey for his entrances and exits, and the direction he has given the other actors. At one entrance, Henry encounters an industrial-grade web of iron rebar and needs to dash around backstage to come on where Jeffrey has directed him to. In another manipulation, Jeffrey has leveraged his relationship with Ellen to strip Macbeth's clothes from him in their first meeting, to wash him down from the battlefield on stage, a move by which Jeffrey seeks to humanize her otherwise Machiavellian caricature. And she does so, during which move everyone discovers Henry plays the role Commando. Henry is furious at Jeffrey's meddling, which at the close of the production he reviews with a punch to Jeffrey's face, but Jeffrey forces him to acknowledge the energy he drew from playing outside his comfort zone, and the audience's enthusiastic response. In other moves, Jeffrey is able to work with Romeo and Juliet to get them deeply into character, and manipulate the artsy-fartsy Darren Nichols into presenting a traditional, romantic vision of the play, certainly appreciated by the commercial sponsor, who makes a short speech at the top of the production about how he and his wife of 17 years have never missed a production of the show that they could get to, and how much meaning it holds for him particularly as his wife that evening is laid up in the hospital, and she'll be fine, but when he thinks back on the life they've put together over the years, that show is so important to them. It's a plain-spoken, moving tribute to the power of theater to ordinary people. So much better than presenting it as intellectualized, bloodless nonsense. As for the seemingly destructive ad campaign, Richard is reeling from his discovery that Froghammer is a fraud, that the rebranding consultant is actually a dentist from Halifax who has just been doing random things and their rebranding efforts are a disaster. He has a nightmare in which he's beheaded by a board member dressed as Cardinal Richelieu. So when he slouches in the day of season openers, ready to face the disaster, he finds the parking lot is crammed with teenagers who have been excited by the racy, unconventional ad campaign. They all want to buy tickets, Anna complains. They don't know how openers work. But ultimately, the festival is actually saved. Richard goes from being afraid he's going to be jailed by the board of directors to having navigated a hit season. If you're having trouble hearing it in my voice, I absolutely friggin' love this series. I love theater people, the talent, the dedication, the commitment required to come together and tell a story, present us to ourselves, speak truth to power, to explore worlds, craft narratives, and unlock meaning. Particularly having participated in several Shakespeare in the Park productions in Minot over the years, the ability to take centuries-old constructs and wordplay and convey them to a modern audience, I just love the process of deconstructing, infusing, repackaging, and delivering these stories. The hapless father of Kate and Bianca in Taming of the Shrew, the blithe, supercilious Count Orsino in Twelfth Night, and the outraged yet endlessly optimistic Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet. I loved the role and the roles I played in telling these stories, the talented casts I worked with, and the productions we managed to present. So taking this chance to rewatch Slings and Arrows was such a joy for me. I have missed being a part of it. I love watching it, love watching ordinary people construct towering drama and comic mastery and witness the creative process in action. A troupe of actors armed with nothing more than a story to tell walk into an empty space and, at their best, create magic.
Diving into the classic collection.
I took some additional time with these episodes during my cataloging process, mainly because I knew immediately they would comprise my Friday night feature, and also because of love, which in turn limited my cataloging efforts into this set of discs. Following on my love of theater, I'd completely forgotten about Christopher Guest's ridiculous entry For Your Consideration, a 2006 partial improv piece presented by HBO featuring a familiar cast of goofs including Eugene Levy, Parker Posey, Catherine O'Hara, Bob Balaban, Michael McKean, and Fred Willard. Ever since encountering Waiting for Guffman at a cast party, I have enjoyed guests' approach to film as community theater, watching a talented cast present unique characters, in this case, themselves a troupe of actors in the making of an independent film called Home for Purim, a small, hopelessly overweening family drama around which improbably Oscar buzz begins to bubble, and we get to see how the characters react to the hype. Fun piece. One entry that left me completely cold, however, was the HBO presentation of a 1975 dramatic art film by Michelangelo Antonioni called The Passenger, featuring Jack Nicholson as a journalist who, on assignment in Chad, assumes the identity of a dead businessman who also happens to be an arms dealer with regional entanglements. Having plunked down and watched some of it, it's about 2 hours of plodding disinterest. Probably not a piece I'll revisit at any point. Also not much of interest was HBO's presentation of a 2006 French art film called The Science of Sleep, wherein the lead character, Stéphane, spends an awful lot of time in pointless dreamscape and retreat from the loss of his father. His waking life isn't especially interesting either, and the whole thing struck me as being weird for the sake of weird. To be fair, I wasn't giving either of these entries much of a chance, and if there is some reason I should revisit them, please give me a heads up, but right now they just seem like space that could have been put to better use. I was thrilled, however, to discover I'd archived the PTV episode of Family Guy from 2005, in which the Griffins miss the Emmys and David Hyde Pierce's shocking wardrobe malfunction, which inspires Peter to found his own television production company to air whatever he wants. The FCC swoops in and overreaches, censoring everyone's day-to-day life. This episode includes Stewie beating the crap out of Osama bin Laden, the always inspiring installment of the Side Boob Hour, and the delightful musical number F the FCC. Love this episode.
Current collection.
I see where I cataloged the series finale of Class, and I didn't bother to pull it up for a second look. I wasn't especially moved by it. I noted few analogues in either attitude or aspiration between the spin-off and its parent production, Doctor Who. It had wacky magical sci-fi that tried to make sense in the universe it created for itself, but it demanded too many different problems of its limited antagonists for even the 8-episode run it aired. There were some legitimate dramatic explorations. An estranged father returns and all but terrorizes his family. A soccer coach's tattoo is feeding on soccer players. Pretty delicate and, did we mention, voracious flowers from another dimension feed on anything they encounter. And oh yes, how could we forgot, one of the main characters somehow shares a heart with a craggy night beastie in an alternate dimension. But even so, she's more concerned with who'll squire her to the prom, or the British equivalent of prom, or some damn thing. Honestly, these characters were always trapped in their high school storylines. Even the teenage king in exile whose handler wants to kill him, but can't because it would also kill her. She wants to kill him because he holds her people in some kind of astral prison, but he's only doing that because they're his only connection to his homeworld, or something like that, and he's also dealing with being gay on top of being an alien, so, life is complicated. There were a lot of potential storylines, but what Class seemed to do was water down what were not significantly better storylines on Doctor Who, and wow, am I hoping for better when that show returns in Season 11 with the new showrunner. Stephen Moffat had a few gems, but he had more clunkers, and new Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker. Cancelling Class will hopefully make more writing resources available and produce a better show. In movie alerts, I saved Pam Grier in the IFC presentation of Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown from 1997, and Antonio Banderas exploring the romantic potential of Stockholm Syndrome with Victoria Abril as a B-movie starlet in the Turner Classic Movies presentation of NC-17 rated Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down from 1989. And oh wow, speaking of B-movies, I pulled in the Grindhouse spectacular Danny Trejo's Machete Kills from 2013 off IFC. Plus a few others, Home and Lucy off FX, Up off of Freeform, and The Maze Runner, also off FX. These last couple I found on disc X086, which presented a new challenge for me I hadn't encountered as yet. It was recorded directly from my DVR to Tabitha. It was finalized and everything, but when I popped it in Sonia upstairs, she threw a disc error. I looked it over, I couldn't see anything wrong with the disc. I popped it back into source recorder Tabitha, and indeed the disc was already finalized. Tabitha was also capable of playing the disc, but couldn't fix whatever was wrong with it, which, given that there were 7 chapters but only 5 divisions, seems to have been significant. When I was clicking through the menu, for instance, there was no indication that up was on this disc at all, so clearly something was structurally amiss. I brought Tabitha up to visit Sonia, got them talking, pressed play and record, and left them in conference overnight. When I checked in on them on Friday, Sonia presented me with a clean copy of everything Tabitha had managed to record. I clicked finalized, and I had a recovered version of Disc X086. It was all in one title, so I had to approach it like a classic collection disc, forwarding through the digital tracking information to indicate where each track started, including a division between an episode of Bob's Burgers and a neighboring scrap where Tina imagines flying over an island of prone, compliant boys, kissing each one in turn, called Quickie Kiss It, from the Seaplane episode. Also part of this recovered disc was the second installment in the first season of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I'd not been too enthusiastic about this series when I first encountered it, but I'll admit it sucked me in. The character was created by Douglas Adams, so it's got excellent bona fides. The new series takes place after the original series, which ran in 2010. Dirk is a peppy, optimistic gadfly who bounces through the world of this show, tracing the interconnectedness of all things to the perpetual irritation of bellhop Todd, played by Elijah Wood, who Dirk has identified as his assistant. They are apparently investigating the problems of human-animal mind transfers, time travel technology, and innocently brainless thugs, all the while dodging Bart Kurlish as something called a holistic assassin, who is targeting Dirk for reasons even she can't explain. There are missing heiresses, tied-up security agents, hallucinating drummers protected by fear-consuming ne'er-do-wells, kidnappings and shootings, and at one point it looked like a penthouse hotel room had been destroyed by fire, gunplay, and a shark. But yes, open mind, the show does make its own kind of sense if you just let it play out. I wasn't able to catch the second season as it aired, and the show was not picked up for a third season, but it was plenty entertaining, and if the BBC America does air it again, I'll definitely be watching.
Taking care of some old business.
Finally, in a little old business, I brought in another episode of The President Show and decided this would be as good a time as any to go through and rename those episodes. The first couple I'd actually identified by their themes. There were just a couple that I'd listed by what they were called on TV.com. Anyway, while I was thinking about it, I pulled up those discs and identified the themes of the episodes, updated my calendar, then went through and updated my blog. I've got to say, a lot of times the turnaround on that show from current events to air date was not very long. I suspect show creator Anthony Adamaniuk had some general themes he had planned to explore, wove them into the press briefing segment at the top of the show, approached the desk bit about 50-50 as a riffing monologue in a scripted piece, followed by some taped segments, guest interviews, which sometimes posed some seriously thoughtful questions, and wrapped up in a farewell address. Organized like that, the show wouldn't need a lot of additional ripped from the headlines material to feel 100% fresh. I hope it comes back. He does a really good job with the show and the commentary, and especially the satire.
What I've been watching.
And now, in what I've been watching, I had a chance to watch the premiere of Ryan Murphy's second season of American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace. Set in Florida in the late 1990s, we see fashion icon Gianni Versace ensconced in luxury. He is partnered, but he wakes up alone, and along with servants, there are beautiful men wandering randomly around. Not many of them, but based on the opulence of the setting, it seems clear that this is a man who likes to look at beautiful things, and they qualify. Following a light breakfast of fresh fruit, Versace leaves his mansion and goes to a nearby newsstand to pick up a handful of magazines, which I suppose tracks. A servant wouldn't know necessarily what selection of magazines he'd want on any given day. As he returns, however, a figure marches across the park, pistol drawn, and fires on him. Serial killer Andrew Cunanan. We've tracked this figure for a few steps by this point. He spent some time in silent meditation on a beach with a hardcover fashion book. He waded fully clothed into the surf to scream into the ocean. On his way to his target, he threw up in a public toilet. So he seems to be at least conflicted about the hit, which later in the show it is suggested he's a suspect in other killings. But he's also wormed his way into his intended target's life as well, years before, striking up a conversation with Versace at a nightclub with a made-up story about an earlier meeting, lying about himself to flatter his way into an invitation to an opera for which Versace had designed the costumes. Talking about Versace to his sister, Andrew makes it sound like this famous designer was entirely smitten with him, so naturally he was flattered, and not just the beautiful but flaky nothing that honestly Versace should have had no trouble seeing through right away. Following the attack, police chase down leads and get a couple of lucky breaks. They investigate Antonio D'Amico, Versace's partner of 15 years, and try to get their head around the meaning of an open relationship. When Versace's sister shows up, she wants nothing to do with D'Amico and seeks to circle the wagons around the family. By the end of the episode, the police are tracking some leads, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the story plays out. Honestly, this story was barely on my radar at the time, so this is pretty much completely fresh for me, and I can totally understand the appeal for a consummate storyteller like Murph. It'll be cool to see how they track the manhunt and subsequent investigation in an environment of wealth and privilege. In other viewing, I've been enjoying Grownish. This last week's episode stopped halfway through and let a sports announcer break down the realities of money in college athletics, explored here through the prism of Zoe Johnson tutoring troubled basketball star Cash Mooney. Over the course of the episode, Nomi has a fight with her lesbian girlfriend who is not okay with what she calls her bisexuality phase. Nomi responds by turning to the handsome guy who sparked this kerfuffle, who agrees the girlfriend way overreacted, that he's messed around with guys, it's no big deal. Nomi asks what he means by that. He says, oh yeah, he's bisexual too, just like her. This does not seem to set well with Nomi. To me, this is exactly the kind of double standard it's cool that not quite network shows like this are exploring. As I noted recently, that B fades out in a lot of LGBTQ discussions, and people absolutely have the right to react to other people's sexuality with whatever comfort level they have, but rejecting a potential love interest simply because of who else that person might also be attracted to is bizarre. And inhuman, actually. I mean, even in 100% heterosexual pairings, either partner might also be attracted to all sorts of other members of the opposite sex. It's basically a matter of commitment. If you're a couple in a committed relationship, you've made that commitment to each other, and you might absolutely be attracted to a wide range of humanity, but you're only seeing each other. And if you're not, and that's objectionable, then you as a couple need to have a conversation about that and decide if that's working or not. But just the condition of being bisexual does not mean that the moment you're out of sight of your partner, you're chasing after absolutely everyone else. I mean, attraction is attraction, dating is dating, and commitment is commitment. We're all just people trying to make connections, and the less often we approach others' sexuality as weird or gross just because it's different, the better off we're likely to be. Very quickly, the follow-up episode of The X-Files with Richard Langley of the lone gunman trapped in the Matrix pulled me in a little bit more, and I'll grudgingly keep an eye on it for now. I haven't seen it yet, but last week's episode of Supernatural laid in the foundation for the series' Wayward Sisters spinoff, which seems like it'll probably be pretty cool. The Magicians turned in a solid quest installment, sending King Elliot across the Felurian Sea to confront a mystic priest and the monster terrorizing his people, while Quentin and Jade explore rogue magic run amok in New York. And speaking of running amok, in Happy, Haley's imaginary friend, a blue cartoon unicorn, helps save her father, Christopher Melonius hitman Nick Sachs, from almost certain execution in a mob boss's garage, with only 2 episodes left to save her and a dozen other abducted children from a raging psycho. Oh, and in more light-hearted fun, this week sees the premiere of The Alienist on TNT, adapted from the period thriller of Caleb Carr. A 19th-century psychiatrist develops the science of profiling to track the exploits of a most bizarre and inhuman serial killer who is hunting some of New York's most vulnerable, child prostitutes who, even in the era of Police Commissioner Roosevelt's reforms, New York's finest consider beneath their contempt. In anticipation of this release, I reread my copy of this work, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they manage this deep and densely written storytelling. And with that, thank you so much for checking in my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes of this podcast at Apple Podcasts and videofuzzy.libsyn.com. Feedback is always appreciated, and you can contact me through my blog or podcast sites or through my Video Fuzzy page on Facebook. For Video Fuzzy, I'm Terry J. Amon. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.